Good morning, everyone. I hope that you're all well today. Good morning to you all. Nice to see you. Hello. So we are going to finish the Turing reading today, just before we get back to it. Good morning, all. Before we get back to the Turing reading, with a view to looking at the objections that Turing raises, and also, of course, his answers to them, which are very interesting. I just want to give you a couple of quick housekeeping notes, and I'll repeat this at the end. So just so you'll know, there's a couple of things we need to be mindful of. Firstly, I know that many of you are wondering about the first assignment and when that's going to be required of you. So I've set a date. The game plan is that we're right on schedule. I just wanted to make sure that we were able to remain on this new sort of scheduling format with the plenaries on Monday and our normal breakout group with those in my section M on Thursdays. I mean, that's working according to plan, and it should do for the rest of the semester. This is the plan that we're going to stick to. So in any case, long story short, your first essay will be due on the 12th of October, Monday the 12th of October. So that's giving you a little more time, and after that the frequency will increase. The second essay will be due around that same date in November, and the third one around that same date in December. But this first one, I'll give you a little more time to work on it. This week, today, we're going to finish Turing. You're welcome, Mimi. Next week, we're going to finish, we'll start and finish John Searle, and that's the fifth reading. That's week 5, and Searle completes this section of the course, the first sort of 3 segments in the course. So basically, I'll give you the extra time after the Searle reading. You have an extra 10 days or so in order to write your first essay. So I'll open up the portal. I'll put the announcement on Blackboard. If you forget, please mark your calendars anyway. Now, if you wish to, that your due date will be Monday, the 12th of October. I'll put that up into the Blackboard announcements, and I will also email everybody to give you a reminder that way. And again, you'll be able to choose from any of the questions that are already up there in your Google Drive folders, and that is any of the questions pertaining to this first set of readings. All right. We'll finish Turing this week, and we'll complete John Searle next week. That will be the first batch of readings. After that, we change the topic. We come on to a new set of readings. And yes, any one of them, exactly. Don't answer them all. They're not. It's not a quiz. Each one of those questions is a separate standalone essay, and you should indeed pick just one. Okay. I know that occasionally some student misunderstands and tries to answer all of them in 1,500 words. That's not a good idea. Just pick one. Okay. Anyone you like. Well, the guidelines are all up there. Everything is up there. Everything is up there, including the guidelines to writing an essay. So I strongly suggest that you read all of that before you sit down and write your essay, long before. Yes, each essay is 1,500 words and must also include footnotes or endnotes and lists of references, that is whatever works you consult. Okay, but the guidelines are all up there in the Google Drive folder, and I strongly suggest that you read them. That will help you to shape your essay. And the Writing Center is available to you. You can make appointments online, and I strongly urge all of you, before you hand your essay in to me, to make an appointment with the Writing Center and show it to them. That's one of the reasons I'm giving you extra time, because they are not going to help you do the philosophy, but they're going to help you with the grammar, punctuation, some cases formatting, to make it look correct, formatting endnotes and formatting your references and so forth according to whichever style you choose. Again, I've said that any style is fine, whether it's PLA, a Postmodern Language Association style, or APA style, or Chicago style. There are a number of styles. It doesn't matter to me as long as you're consistent. Well, Brianna, the essay is based on the readings we've been covering since the beginning of this term, and which will end with this next week's reading on Searle. That kind of question is something that you would know the answer to if you read the syllabus carefully, because the readings are all grouped. So we have a first section, a second section, and a third section in this course. And the essay questions for each section pertain only to the readings that are done in that section. So in other words, the essays, for your first essay, the questions are going to be about the 5 philosophers we will have covered, right? Descartes, Berkeley, Churchland, Turing, and Searle. That's essay number 1, and you'll have a bunch of questions on them, okay? Well, around 1500 means like 1499 is good, 1501 is good. If you start chiseling too much, like 1300 words is not close to 15, right? You don't have to write 2,000 words either. So all of your word processing programs have word count functions. So just try to make it around 1,500, okay? Plus or minus, a few words is all right. Another important housekeeping question for Mimi: will we have lecture Monday? Yes. That is to say, and please bear this in mind for the whole course. We've already rearranged this course, to do the Monday-Thursday thing. It's been very complicated, but everyone now is in the swing of it. And we're also, of course, recording all the lectures, including the Thursday lectures. But I am not going to further disrupt the schedule. Yeah, you need to make sure, and I'm telling you this, I was going to say it anyway, that, let me just explain this. The academic calendar pertains to the normal on-campus schedule. If we were coming to campus, I hope we will again soon, but if we were coming to campus, then the academic calendar would tell us, which days we have legal holidays or religious holidays, and which days the campus is closed, and no classes. And then when they turn, Monday to Tuesday into Tuesday, or Tuesday into Thursday, or however they rearrange the days of the week to accommodate these holidays, that's all in normal times. But if you still want to adhere to that, and that's fine with me, you're entitled to adhere to the academic calendar, but I'm overriding it. I'm giving a lecture every Monday morning. I don't care whether it's a holiday or not. So, of course, the lecture was already up there, Elijah. The lecture from the past Monday was uploaded the same night or the day after. So please don't ask me that question, on Thursday, although I'm glad you asked it. You can rely on me to upload Monday's lectures the same day or the very next morning. So you will find it there, I promise. Okay. So getting back to the main issue here, I'm going to record a plenary lecture. I'm going to give and record a plenary lecture every Monday at 9:30, whether it's a legal holiday or not. I'm doing this on Mondays, and I will upload them. So therefore, if you exercise your entitlement to take that day off from classes, as the academic calendar gives you the right to do, that's fine, because the lecture will be visible, it will be uploaded, and again, you can view it asynchronously, okay? So you're not going to lose anything, but I'm not going to further disrupt an already rearranged schedule by changing within that framework, things in order to adjust to an academic calendar, which we've already superseded. You're clear? So I'm not going to rearrange the rearrangement. I'll be teaching on Monday morning at 9:30, rain or shine, and also for this group of Section M on Thursday mornings as well. Thursday at 11, yeah? Monday at 9:30, Thursday at 11. And then all you need to do, if you can't attend the lecture on Monday morning or you don't want to, you can view it on Tuesday or view it at your convenience, all right? On YouTube. Is that clear? Everybody good with this? Excellent. Okay, as long as you're clear about the arrangement, that's the most important thing that you all need to know. So I'm not going to mess around with this arrangement just because there are further complications introduced by the academic calendar. It's just too confusing for everybody. So I'm just going to stick with this. And if you can make it on Monday morning, you're welcome to at 9:30. If not, just watch it at your convenience, as I know a lot of you are doing, and I know that from the number of views. I know people are catching up, okay? So do it this way. All right. So essay number 1, due October 12th. which is a Monday, and I'll be emailing you a reminder. It'll be on the Blackboard announcements as well. And class as normal. Next week, we'll be covering the final reading in this section of our course, and that's by John Searle, and that's the reading immediately after Turing in your textbook. Okay, so is everybody good with that? I guess. Okay, are there any questions? Thank you. I'm glad. Thank you for responding. Are there any questions about the well, we covered a lot of material last day, and I know that some of you were kind of surprised, and some of you were mildly horrified by this Sophia creature, and I know there are definitely mixed emotions. So I mean but this is where we're headed. This is the future, right? She's probably the most successful, or it, I mean, whatever. Is there any rubric? I don't know what a rubric means. There are guidelines to writing an essay, and I'm saying this again to everybody. I've already said it at least twice this morning. There are guidelines to writing an essay in philosophy that I prepared for your edification and your guidance, and those guidelines are in your Google Drive folder. So if you have questions of this nature, tafsir, or is there a rubric? Yeah, there are. Whatever you understand by a rubric, I understand by guidelines, and there are at least 3 different things, okay, that you might want to call a rubric. So please read the guidelines, and they will give you, I think, a clear picture of the way in which you could craft your essay. You're more than welcome. But if you take a little time to look in the Google Drive folder, you will find the answers to many of these questions that are already in there in detail, better than I can say. All right. And instead of footnotes, a works cited page. Well, Rita, that's an important question. If you're not quoting or paraphrasing any material, then you can just have a works cited page. But please do not make the mistake of quoting material and not putting a note in, or of just cutting and pasting material from sources and not putting in footnotes or endnotes. That's plagiarism. If you do that, you get 0 on the essay. You're more than welcome to embody quotations to support whatever you want to say, or to embody paraphrases, which is your rearrangement of someone else's words. But if you do either of those things, that is, you embody someone else's words literally, you have to put quotations and a citation. And if you paraphrase, meaning you rearrange someone else's words, then you also need to put a citation. So again, I'm going to say this for your benefit. The definition of plagiarism by the Office of Academic Integrity is on the college website. I've taken the trouble to download it and re-upload it. It's a PDF, and it's sitting in your Google Drive folder. And I would really counsel all of you to read the guidelines to plagiarism as defined by the Office of Academic Integrity, so that you make sure you don't commit plagiarism as they define it. If you do so, you'll be punished harshly. It's the worst thing that the worst academic offense a student can commit is plagiarism. So please make sure you know what it is so that you don't commit it. And as Rita asks, can we not use footnotes and only a works cited page? If you're not quoting anything and if you're not paraphrasing anything, then you just need a works cited page. But if you're quoting or paraphrasing, you need also, in addition to that, footnotes or endnotes, your choice, to cite properly the source of the work that you've used, which is not your words, yes? Otherwise, it's plagiarism. It's very important. And then Rabia asks, also a good question, are we required to use outside material? Well, are we required to use outside material? Rabia, this is a university course, so if you just want to confine yourself to the readings that we've covered and discuss them, then that's okay. If you write a decent essay just looking at the works we've covered, then you'll pass the course. If you do outside research to substantiate whatever you want to say and to enrich the substance of your essay, then that's better. because you're demonstrating scholarliness, you're demonstrating effort, initiative, and inevitably that could lead to a better grade. So, consider that doing outside work is a good thing. I'm not talking about citing 100 sources, and don't please make the mistake of putting in a whole laundry list of books that you never refer to. It doesn't impress me or any other professor. Okay, don't think that if you put in a long list at the end of, oh yeah, I'll just tack on all these books, that look like they're relevant to the essay, but if they're not mentioned anywhere or cited anywhere in your essay, then it's going to count against you. In other words, if you do legitimate research, or don't do any research, but don't pretend to do research. All right. And Theus asks, in text citation, I don't understand the question. What is in? I'll come back to you, Rabia. In text citation, I don't understand what you're asking me. Like if we quote, yes, exactly. That again, read the guidelines on plagiarism and understand that if you quote something, then you have to put a footnote or an endnote, like a numeral after the quote. You have to use quotation marks, put a number in superscript, and then put a footnote or an endnote to explain where that quotation came from. Okay? If that's what you mean by in text citation, correct. And you're not offending me, Rabia. No questions are not offensive in a philosophy class, but it's fine. It's fine to ask. But you want to know if it's a requirement. Like how many? No, I don't. We're not doing paint by numbers here. So I'm not saying use 2 sources, use 5 sources, use 10 sources. I'm not saying that to you. I'm saying it's up to you how many sources you want to use. You have to gain a certain kind of independence in a university. It's not like high school where we tell you exactly what we want, or we maybe let you paint by numbers or instruct you to do that. And so it's not a requirement. But it's better if you do some outside research. How many? I mean, how many is, how long is a piece of string? It's how many you feel or how few you feel are relevant to making the point that you want to make. All right? Don't go crazy. But also, if you do a little bit of research, is better than none. And Thaddeus asks again, you put the author and page number. Yet this is what you need to look up, because it's not just author and page number. It depends on the style that you choose. Okay, I'm not going to explain this to you. This is all in the Writing Center will explain everything to you. The styles that you're allowed to use are all available online, whether it's Chicago Manual of Style or APA style or MLA style. If you just look those up, you will get all of the ways in which you're supposed to convey the information. All right, that's like the bookkeeping. And I'm not going to delve into that. That's all freely available online. And Rita's explaining, you're welcome for any clarification. Rita explains, I think some of us are just confused because in other classes we just put in text. In his article, Freud speaks about page number and then a work site rather than a footnote. Well, that's a different style. Again, this is what I'm calling styles. There are different styles. And your professors ought to explain that any of these styles is acceptable as long as you stick with that style consistently. So use a style you're accustomed to, but make sure that everything you quote or paraphrase is somehow cited. Okay, that's the main thing. And I'm giving you complete flexibility rather than imposing one system on you. And also a question more to the students: do we have a class group chat? I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't think you do. If you want to set one up for yourself somehow, you guys are probably all more adept than me with these platforms. So if you want to set up a Facebook page or something, I mean, do it. But there is nothing on Blackboard for this. If you want me to set one up for you on Blackboard, I can try and look into it. But I'm not that familiar with Blackboard, to tell you the truth. Okay. So you can do what's up if you want to do if you guys want to have a group discussion on what's up. I mean, that's fine, but I can't organize that link. Okay, I mean, I can't organize that. If you guys want to take the initiative and have a group, I'm all in favor of it, but someone would have to step up and take charge of it. Okay. All right. So we've been now 20 minutes on the housekeeping, and I hope that everything is clear. I mean, it's all very important, of course, to be clear. Since this is the first essay, then obviously we want to be clear. So I'll leave that to you, and thank you very much for Rita, Anna, and all of you who are attempting to organize this. So let me now return to the material, okay? You're all seeing everything in the chat room that you need to see. So I won't interrupt you there, but please now let's return to Turing. And I wanted to say one more thing before we actually go back to Turing, and because it came out of last day and there was some comment about it, which I think was quite relevant to us. And that is remember we were discussing this notion of how Westerners in particular are kind of concerned about robots, maybe a little bit scared of robots taking over or this sort of thing, where, I mean, whether it's just economic, and I think I dismissed that fear, showing that every time there's an innovation, it tends to create more jobs than it destroys, right? Like the automobile industry created millions of jobs, and whereas the horse industry, the people catering to the horse industry and working in that industry lost their jobs, but there were millions more jobs created by cars than were lost by the end of sort of horses as public transportation. And similarly, the IT revolution, if you think about hardware and software and platforms and social media and artificial intelligence and how big Google is and how big all these media platforms are, they created vastly, again, millions more jobs than were lost by the typewriter industry when typewriter factories closed. Okay, so just don't be worried about the economics. That's how our human civilizations have always progressed, by invention and innovation and industries changing. And right now, as some of you surely know, we're preparing you for jobs that don't yet exist, right? Some of you know this, yeah? So how can we do that? Well, we don't know how to do that. We're having a discussion now, an ongoing discussion about, because the technologies are evolving so quickly that we can't really be sure we know how to prepare you for jobs that don't yet exist. We have to build on existing knowledge to do it. But I guarantee you that a lot of you are going to be, in the next 5 years, 10 years, whenever you're launched into the job market, or even when you're already in the job market and working in a given sector, you're going to encounter new sectors. New things are going to come up all the time. So we have to be committed somewhat to lifelong learning in order to keep up. But the good news is there are always going to be new areas in which employment is possible. I think the rule of thumb will be that the more education you get, the better off you're going to be in general, because the more education you get, the better prepared in theory you'll be, at least, to shift from one sector to another and not kind of get over specialized, unless you're in a very stable area. Okay, but whatever area you enter, you'll have to do upgrades to your learning. If you enter an established profession like law or healthcare or any established profession, you're still going to upgrade. You're still going to have to upgrade every year. Every month. There's constantly new things going on. So we all have to be somewhat devoted to lifelong learning, all right? That's an important point. So that's not the main fear about robots. So I think that there's another fear, and I just wanted to touch on that briefly today. And you will tell me with your feedback if this is something that you experience, because I think that most Westerners certainly have this deep in their psyches. And it's really, you could call it the Frankenstein Syndrome. Okay, you've all heard of Frankenstein, right? Shirley, just type Frankenstein. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Yes. Okay, Emily, many of you. Okay, you're all responding. Yes, so you don't know about Frankenstein. Okay, and the story of Frankenstein is really interesting. Mary Shelley created the novel, right? And she was hanging out with a bunch of English poets. And I think they were in Italy. They loved Italy, and they were in Italy and they were hanging out in Italy, and they were bored one weekend. They said, let's invent horror stories. Let's invent, like nightmare horror stories. This is long before Stephen King. And they sat around, and she cooked up Frankenstein, and I think that won the prize. Okay, this is the one we remember the best. And it's one of the first. Yeah, it's not really sci-fi. It's partly sci-fi, definitely, Nivriti. It's also partly horror, right? It's a mixed genre. And the earlier Frankenstein movies were really definitely horror movies, not sci-fi movies, but horror movies, because they're about this monster who turns on us. But it's a monster that we created. Yes, it's Dr. Frankenstein who creates this sort of robot, really, kind of living thing, imbues it with life, but it's all different body parts stuck together, right? And it's a monster. And in the end, it's very tragic because it wants to be human, it wants to be accepted, but it's not, partly because of its appearance, partly because it's not really from us. It doesn't have parents, unfortunately. So it's a creation in a laboratory, so it's kind of other. It's been otherized from the beginning, and so it creates this dichotomy, and the monster ends up being very angry, as one could well imagine, and one would like to be Frankenstein, surely. Be ostracized or have people horrified by you, but so it turns on its creator, and that's the myth of Frankenstein. And I think that is deeply ensconced, the very fact that you still all know this, and from generation to generation, I don't know where you heard of it, but it never goes away. It's ever since Mary Shelley created this novel, it's been with us in one form or another, and people always know about Frankenstein. And I think that's one of the things. So it's like a psychological fear we have of robots, because we don't want to end up making Frankensteins. That I think is what drives this more than the economic stuff. It's that people are worried that we'll end up creating a monster that turns against us and that harms us in some way. And that was also Asimov's, or part of Asimov's fixation. We discussed his laws of robotics last day, and he also wanted to make sure with his top-down programming that robots would never harm us, thus sort of assuring people, or trying to assure people, that we would be safe from robots, because we wouldn't be allowing them to turn into Frankensteins, right? So I think Frankenstein was in the back of his mind too. And I think a lot of people are worried about Frankenstein. And that would also account for why in Asia, people are not so concerned. The Japanese don't get carried away by Frankenstein. Maybe they know about the novel, but it's not something that's coming from their cultural tradition. So they're not worried. They're not as worried about it as Westerners. I think that in the Western world, we all are kind of brought up with this Frankenstein fear. And the thing is that what most of you may not know, some of you may know this, but many of you may not know this, that it actually has even deeper roots. That's why it's so pervasive. If it were just Frankenstein, I think it'd be easier for us to kind of take with a grain of salt and say, okay, but robots are not all Frankensteins, yeah? But it's just that. It goes deeper than that. And it goes not just to horror or to sci-fi. It goes back to religion. And it goes specifically back to the Abrahamic faiths, and goes back to the very first book of Genesis. So in Genesis, when God creates man, what is he created from? Anybody know this or remember this? What were we created from originally? Dirt. Yeah, earth. Right? Earth. Exactly. Not dirt. I mean, that's yeah, it is dirt. The dust, you could say dust. Exactly. They're different words to describe it, right? We could say dirt. We could say dust. We say this ashes to ashes, dust to dust at funerals, yes, because we recognize that. But the actual original Aramaic or the Hebrew is Ben Adam. The first human is Ben Adam, and it's son of Adam. It's earth. It's son of earth. Okay, so God creates earth, or a pinch of dust, a pinch of dirt, a pinch of earth, and what? And somehow breathes like a Holy Spirit into it to make it alive, yes? So we also are Frankenstein. And if you go back to the book of Genesis, Adam and Eve got kicked out of paradise, right? We got kicked out of Eden because we turned against our maker, didn't we? We did what? We weren't supposed to do what? Yeah, Mama knows this. And what were we not supposed to do? What was the one thing? Yeah, they eat the apple. It wasn't just an apple. It's the forbidden fruit, right? If it was apples, would be okay. But it's the tree. Yeah, Elijah more precisely is saying it's to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Yes, we were morally innocent, right? We were running around naked. They weren't ashamed of their nakedness. They were like children. They were morally very innocent, pure, but they were tempted. They had this flaw, and they were tempted, and they succumbed to temptation. And you know the story. They ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Immediately they became embarrassed and covered themselves up, and they, so they did this, they did the one thing they weren't supposed to do. And so in that sense, they disobeyed their creator, which is the story, the myth of Eden, and God was so angry that he kicked out of there. And that's, basically what our sentence was, but it's not just life, it's from generation to generation. And anyway, you see that this is also the origin of Frankenstein, because we're talking about a creature, namely humans in this case, but we're still made from dust. And we had life breathed into us by our creator, just as Dr. Frankenstein somehow uses electricity in the novel, right, to activate life in the monster. And we turned against our creators. In the myth of Genesis, we turned against our creators, against our creator rather. So we are also monstrous in that context. We also behave badly, monstrously, if you like, or we'd still be in paradise. So I think that the Frankenstein story is older than Frankenstein, and hopefully you could see a little bit of it being reconstructed from the myth of Eden, from the idea that humans themselves disobeyed their creator. Okay, so that's a possibility that we have, and maybe Frankenstein is in some sense imitating his maker by turning against us too, since humans made him. Okay, so that's just some thought about the antiquity of that story, and perhaps the purchase in our psyches, therefore, is much deeper even than Mary Shelley's story. And for that reason, that would just be another reason, a stronger reason for us to be worried about robots turning against us. Okay, but again, in Asia, for example, you don't encounter this problem because they don't have the myth of Genesis to begin with. All right, that's just a bit of food for thought. Back to Turing. Okay, let's not blame Turing, right, for any of this. But we're back to Turing, and we're going to look now at some of the objections. Not all of them. In this extract ends with number 3, and then we'll go to 4. There are several really interesting objections that people raised even before Turing, but here's one, and it's a mathematical objection, it's called. Objections to what? Remember, it's objections to the idea that a robot could be or a computer could be as intelligent as a human, right? Objections to the idea that a machine could ever pass a general Turing test, even though a machine can do better or quicker computations than us and can play chess better than us. It still can't carry on a conversation better than us. And one of the objections is this mathematical one, that there are limitations anyway on what a discrete state machine can do. Discrete state meaning, in this case, a digital machine. Okay, and the best known is Gödel's theorem, that in fact proves that there are questions that we can't answer. So I'm not going to go into this. It's an advanced topic in logic, but the German logician Kurt Gödel was able to prove in the 20th century that any system which is consistent is necessarily incomplete. And so that there are going to be questions that we can't answer. There will be always be mathematical theorems that we are unable to prove or disprove. And so there's always going to be some incompleteness in our knowledge if we demand consistency, which we do. If we want answerable questions to be consistently answered, and if we want our computations to be accurate, then we have to pay a certain price for that. And that price is going to be incompleteness. There will always be questions that we can't answer. And if that's the case, we cannot also suppose that machines will be able to answer these questions for us. So there will be certain questions that a machine will not be able to answer either. And and Turing's answer to this objection is that sure, there are limitations on our intellects, and there will be limitations on what machines can do as well, but that does not at all do any damage to the imitation game argument. Because if you asked a human, and if you're again in the role of the interrogator, right, and you asked a human to prove an unprovable theorem or a theorem that had not yet been proved, and the human got stuck, and then you asked the machine to do it, and if the machine got stuck, you still wouldn't be able to tell the difference, right? You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And if the machine came up with a proof that the human didn't come up with, and was able to prove a theorem that the human couldn't prove, you as interrogator playing the imitation game would still not know the difference. You say, well, this was a human that was like a really brilliant mathematician that was able to come up with this proof, and maybe this was the machine that couldn't because it hadn't been well enough programmed. So, just because a human and a machine might not be able to answer certain kinds of mathematical and logical questions doesn't, in a Turing test, allow you to know for sure which is the human and which is the machine. And that's basically, in a nutshell, he would answer that objection. The argument from consciousness is, I think, a more interesting argument. And this argument was made by Professor Jefferson in 1949. And here's a quote. Okay? And the quote, there's no footnote. Note, if you guys are quoting, you should have a footnote. Okay, Turing probably puts it in the references to the paper. But anyway, here's a quote from Professor Jefferson. Not until a machine can write a sonnet or compose a concerto because of thoughts and emotions felt, and not by the chance fall of symbols, could we agree that machine equals brain. That is, not only write it, but know that it had written it. No mechanism could feel and not merely artificially signal, an easy contrivance, pleasure at its successes, grief when its valves fuse, be warmed by flattery, be made miserable by its mistakes, be charmed by sex, be angry or depressed when it cannot get what it wants. In other words, no machine can run the gamut of emotions that humans can run, and no machine, moreover, is conscious of what it's doing. Even though it can do certain things, it's not conscious that it's doing them. For example, back to chess, when Garry Kasparov lost the chess tournament, the chess match to Deep Blue, Garry Kasparov was depressed. If Garry Kasparov had beaten Deep Blue as he did the first time, then he probably would have gone out and celebrated. But Deep Blue, according to this argument, was not conscious that it had just beaten the world champion at chess, right? Deep Blue did not go back and did not go out and celebrate, right? Is that clear? Deep Blue was not conscious. It had definitely executed a powerful program that allowed it to defeat the world chess champion, but Deep Blue felt no emotion whatsoever at having done that. Deep Blue didn't say, yay, I just won, the world championship, let's go out and have a beer. Deep Blue didn't know that. Deep Blue didn't know anything, Professor Jefferson is saying, because Deep Blue does not have consciousness. So it's able to execute a task as it's programmed to do, but it does not have anything beyond that we would call consciousness of what it's doing, any more than it's able to feel emotion, maybe pleasure at a success or displeasure at a failure, as humans do, right? So that, for Professor Jefferson, is an argument against the imitation game, that a human would eventually be conveying something much more powerful, much more expansive than a machine could convey, namely consciousness. Remember, that was a question, do you remember this? That was a question that was asked by that interviewer of Sophia, right? He said, are you conscious that you're a robot? Remember that question? He said to her, are you aware? Are you self-aware? You're a robot. Are you aware of that? And what did she do? Very cleverly turned the question back on him, right? And said, well, are you aware that you're a human, or you're just a program called awareness, so that you're programmed by your brain to say, yes, I'm aware. So I could tell you I'm aware, but that doesn't prove I am, right? So we'd like to think we are. Like, let's say someone's got their hands, packages in their hands, and you hold the door for them, right? You do a polite thing, and someone, is bundled up and they can't open, so you open the door, and you're conscious that you did this, right? If the door is automatic, then it's just what? It's just what we call an electric eye, right? There's just a photoelectric cell, and when that beam is broken by someone, the door opens, right? But the door is not conscious that it opened. The door is just reacting to a break in a signal, so it's doing what the circuit is triggered to do. But there, on top of that, there's no consciousness. The door doesn't, quote unquote, know that it that it opened, right? Whereas a human, if you open a door for someone, presumably you did that mechanical thing, but you're also conscious of it, that you, in fact, did it as a planned action, right? That you wanted to do it. So, is that a good objection, right? Because Jefferson's saying, look, whatever a machine can do, even a sophisticated machine, is not conscious that it's doing it, whereas humans are conscious that we're doing it. Correct? I mean, does that sound like a good objection to you? Yes, Ibrahim, I think, Mame, yes. I mean, it is. It's a very interesting objection. You want to say, Ibrahim, please?
Yeah, Professor. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, they are like us and they are conscious.
Yeah.
And then you have a human, and then you have a robot, and you kill a robot. Does that consider a murder as a human?
What a great question. That would depend on the legal status, right, of a robot. Some people would argue that a plant is conscious. And, some people argue, I'm not one of them. There are people who argue that even vegetables in the garden have a kind of consciousness. So when you pull a carrot out of the ground, or you dig up a potato, or even if you're a vegetarian, you're killing something which has some kind of consciousness, like viruses and bacteria. If on that argument also have consciousness, are we allowed to kill bacteria with penicillin? If we're very sick with a bacterial infection, aren't we killing them? Yeah, we are, but they have no legal standing. So, I mean, I'm not turning this into a class in law, but I'm saying that if you unplug a robot, I mean, that's obviously not killing it, but if you, destroy it, then it would be a crime only if it was in somewhere written in law that it's a conscious being with rights. Human rights definitely would apply to, in criminal law, but machine rights don't. And nor do animal rights. That's one of the big arguments today. Yes, we're not even talking about robots yet. We're not still talking about animals. Like, for example, it's legal for us to put down a very old and sick animal. If you have a pet dog or a pet cat or an animal that reaches a certain age and it really is too old to function well, and it's in pain, and it's, and it can't be cured, it's really dying of a, lingering disease, we usually would euthanize it, right? And all you have to do is take it to a vet and pay the fee and sign a paper. You are the legal custodian of that animal. And you have the papers to prove it and the license to prove it, so you're allowed to euthanize that animal, and it's not murder. So if we don't even have that, whereas you're not allowed to practice cruelty against animals or just kill animals indiscriminately. If you go around, if your neighbor's dog is barking too loud, and you decide to shoot the dog, that's probably a crime, almost certainly a crime. So it really depends on what the law has to say. And I think that's we're heading to this question that Ravel's asking is in Sophia. Yeah, if Sophia has citizenship, I mean, I don't really know what that means. If it's an honorary thing, then it's not really binding in law, just like an honorary doctorate. An honorary doctorate is an honorary degree. It doesn't mean you have a PhD. It's an honorary PhD, not the same thing. So maybe she's just an honorary citizen. If you want to look it up, you can let us all know. I can't believe that they made her the kind of citizen that would allow her to have a passport or to have rights under law, right? Or to own property or to get married or to do, that would be crazy at this point, or it seems to me. So if they made her an honorary citizen, then that would be a different thing, right, than making her a citizen. If you're a citizen of a country, then you immediately have all the rights of other citizens in that country, like the right to vote or the right to do whatever. But I would find it hard to believe that a robot is yet advanced enough to enjoy those rights. Okay? Well, these are really good questions, really interesting questions. The main thing is that it appears, according to that objection made in 1949, which still to a certain extent holds up today, that that robots don't seem to have consciousness. Machines don't seem to have consciousness. There's a joke about that. I'll share a little joke with you. Some of you may not get this joke. Well, some of you may immediately get this joke. The joke is, what a thermos bottle, right? Like a thermos keeps hot things hot and cold things cold, right? Yeah, if you pour some hot tea in a thermos, it keeps it hot, right? If you pour something cold in a thermos, it keeps it cold, right? For a while, yeah? So a thermos keeps hot things hot and cold things cold. This is an old joke from one of our chemistry professors way back when I was in high school, okay? And he said, okay, a thermos keeps hot things hot and cold things cold. How does it know the difference? Nobody's laughing. Okay, it's now you're laughing. Okay, somebody's laughing. Yeah, right. Try it at home. Stump your family. Okay, some of you are now laughing. Sure, it's very funny, right? Because we're supposing a thermos is conscious, right? We're imputing consciousness. We know a thermos. I'm glad you're laughing. It means you guys have done enough philosophy. Now you can start laughing at philosophy jokes. This is always a good sign. When I start telling philosophy jokes and the class laughs, it's a good sign. It means you're learning enough philosophy to appreciate these jokes. There's a lot of times philosophy jokes are only make philosophers laugh. Okay, but this is a good thing that you're laughing. Yeah, so it's funny. Why? Because we know that a thermos has no consciousness. The thermos is not saying, oh yeah, I'm aware this is hot, so I have to keep it hot, or I'm aware this. What's it doing? What it's doing is just sealing the contents away from the ambient temperature in the room, right? So it's a temporary forestalling of the second law of thermodynamics, or the law of thermodynamics says that things will eventually reach equilibrium, right? Things always reach equilibrium eventually. The thermos is merely slowing down the process of equilibrium, so the hot thing stays hot and the cold thing stays cold, because they're both insulated from the ambient temperature, which is in the middle of the hot and cold thing that's in the thermos, hot or cold thing in the thermos. That's the technical explanation. The thermos has no idea of the difference between hot and cold. It's not aware. Okay, so how does it know the difference? Well, it doesn't have to. All right. So Jefferson's argument is really the same. He's saying that a robot is never conscious. A computer is never conscious of what it's doing any more than a thermos bottle, he might have added, is conscious of the difference between, what's hot and what's cold. Doesn't need to be. All right. Okay, so how is Turing going to respond? If I go back to this reading, can you still see the reading? Or do I need to? Please say yes or no. I can't hear you.
No.
No. Okay, I thought not. This is when we get away from. This is what I need to do, is to just reshare it with you. Okay. So let me do that. We'll go back to Blackboard and see if I can succeed. We'll go back to the reading together. Application window. Oh dear, where is it? No, it seems to have vanished. Look at that. I don't know what that is. It's sharing the whole Blackboard session. Not good enough. Let me go back. I should never have left the reading. I'm afraid that it's not going to be very cooperative at this point. I have this issue with Blackboard, and it's probably my own deficiency. I apologize for that, but I'm just not able to get it. Okay, there it is, Chrome tab. Okay, let's go. Here we go. This should work. Now you see it? Yes?
Yes.
Good. All right. So the objection from consciousness, how is Turing going to answer that? The argument from consciousness. Well, Turing has an answer to it, okay? And Turing is saying if we develop enough hardware and software, and he predicted this in 1950, right? He said we can simulate this so that it would pass the imitation game, even if you don't think a computer could have emotions or a computer could do like that, what humans can do, and with creativity we eventually can accomplish that. And if you had the following conversation, says Turing, and here's an interrogator talking to a witness. Now imagine it's a witness even beyond what Sophia can do, okay? It's a witness who is as good or better than Sophia. And you say, and you're now talking to a robot that's been programmed to think it's Shakespeare, okay? So the robot's going to play the part of Shakespeare. And you're talking to this witness. Is a robot playing a part of Shakespeare or a human playing the role of Shakespeare? You don't know, right? Whether it's the person or the machine. And you, the interrogator, say, in the first line of your sonnet, which reads, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" It's a very famous sonnet. "Would not a spring day do as well or better?" And the witness says it wouldn't scan, right? The meter is wrong. Well, how about a winter's day? That would scan all right. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shall I compare thee to a winter's day?" That's the same meter because it's two syllables with the accent on the first, so it scans. Okay? And the witness says, yeah, but nobody wants to be compared to a winter's day. True. Summer's nicer, right? You want to compare people to summer, warm, sunny, happy. Winter, maybe not a nice comparison. Then the interrogator, you said, well, would you say Mr. Pickwick reminded you of Christmas? This is presuming familiarity with Charles Dickens. And the witness says, in a way. And the interrogator says, yeah, but Christmas is a winter's day, and I don't think Mr. Pickwick would mind the comparison. And the witness says, I don't think you're serious. By winter's day, one means a typical winter's day rather than a special one like Christmas. So if you had that kind of conversation, Turing says, you wouldn't know whether you were talking to a human witness who was a Shakespeare scholar or pretending to be Shakespeare, or whether you were talking to a robot who obviously has a sense of humor and a sense of poetry and, could basically pass the Turing test. And a robot like that is much closer to our time now, given Sophia and imagining better than Sophia, then that's very close. We're almost there. And so Turing says, what would Professor Jefferson say if the sonnet writing machine was able to answer like that? He would not regard the machine as artificially signaling those answers. This sounds genuine and sincere and humorous and very human. And so such a machine, Turing says, would definitely pass an imitation game. And so he thinks that the mystery of consciousness is not necessarily going to be solved. Again, he's taking this functionalist approach. He's saying we don't have to solve the mystery about consciousness, the hard problem, in order to be able to build and program a machine that could fool the interrogator. I mean, that's a pretty strong reply. The argument for various disabilities, these arguments get better and better, and more challenging and more challenging as we go down the list. This is an interesting argument. And this argument has been made many times as computers have evolved. The argument goes like this. I grant that you can make machines to do all the things you have mentioned, but you will never be able to make one to do X. Okay? So what X could be any number of things. So people say, okay, a machine could never be kind, resourceful, beautiful, friendly, have initiative, have a sense of humor, tell right from wrong, make mistakes, fall in love, enjoy strawberries and cream, make someone fall in love with it, learn from experience, use words properly, be the subject of its own thought, have as much diversity of behavior as a person, do something really new. Okay, so what do you think? Gradually, isn't it the case that AI has whittled down this list? So we can make machines that do a lot of these things now, right? I mean, we don't yet have a robot that does stand-up comedy, but I think that's foreseeable. Don't you think it's foreseeable to have a robot that could do stand-up comedy, right? For example, when we have self-driving cars and we have other kinds of robots which are trying to take people safely from one place to another, they need to be able definitely to have initiative. That's the bottom-up thing. They have to interpret a new situation that they've never seen before and be able to do the right thing on the road, for example. Could robots fall in love with each other? I think it would be really funny to have a kind of a soap opera with robots, okay? I mean, I could see that happening one day. Learning from experience, definitely. We now have learning machines. So I think it's clear that if you just look at the progress of AI since this was written, you'll see that Turing's point is, yeah, you could never simply say by induction, oh yeah, no machine will ever be able to do X, because we've just continually seen time and again, right? We continue to see that machines are capable of doing things that sometimes they were thought not to be ever able to do. Okay, but we know that the science gets better and better, right? Abraham, you have a comment? Please. No, okay, fine. So we see that, I mean, I think that's a good response, a justifiable response from Turing. He's telling us that this principle of induction, just because things have always been a certain way, doesn't mean they have to be that way tomorrow. And science always progresses by doing things that nobody ever thought was possible. Remember, people scoffed at the idea of flying through the air, right? People thought we'd never be able to fly. People scoffed at the idea of rocket ships to the moon. People scoffed at the idea of submarines, that could go to the bottom of the sea and so forth. So I think every time people say this could never happen, never say never. The moral of the story is don't ever say never, because you never know what will be invented. So I think that's a good reply to the objection that just because a machine can't do something today certainly doesn't mean we won't be able to figure out how to make it do that same thing tomorrow. Yeah? All right. And that goes on. There's quite a bit more to that answer. We don't need to go into that. This is a great objection. Lady Lovelace, she's a famous lady or a once famous lady who objected to Babbage's analytical engine. You remember that machine I told you about, the Babbage engine, a huge, big analog machine the size of a room. If you look up Babbage engine, if you Google the pictures, you'll see it. It's a huge machine, and it was able actually to calculate polynomials. Remember, the purpose was to be able to approximate solutions to logarithmic and to to trigonometric functions. So it was a computer. But she said that the analytical engine, her objection was that the analytical engine has no pretensions to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform. Those are her italics. So in other words, it does what we tell it to do, and it's not capable of really doing anything else. And that was her objection to Babbage. Well, if it's her objection to Babbage, then it would be a similar objection to any computer, that it's only doing what we order it to do. And today that objection is a lot harder to sustain, because it has to do things that it's not explicitly ordered to do, right? Turing's objection to this objection, Turing's answer to this objection, is actually taken up in the next, in his reply to the next argument, which is the argument from the informality of behavior. In a nutshell, part of the rebuttal is as follows: that indeed what we see from Deep Blue is that it was able to come up with strategies that we didn't program it explicitly to know, that it had to learn from its experience against the human Kasparov in order to learn to defeat him. So we didn't program that computer directly with instructions on how to defeat Kasparov. No human knew how. And even the chess programmers, the people who made Deep Blue, are all chess masters, but they didn't know how to beat Kasparov either, because he was the world champion. But what they did do was to give Deep Blue the capacity to learn. So by giving a machine the capacity to learn, it is in fact doing more than we tell it to do. We're not just ordering it to do something, we're giving it software that enables it to become a learning device, and therefore to do something on its own that we didn't explicitly know how to program it to do. Is this clear? It's a very important point, right? Because a learning machine is not doing what we tell it explicitly. A learning machine is learning how to do something that we actually don't know how to tell it to do. It has to figure it out, right? And that's a big difference. And if you want a more shocking example, I think what really makes this point clear, and Turing would say, I told you so, and this is really cool, the people who programmed Deep Blue were all chess players. Okay, so I mean, that didn't make Deep Blue able to beat Kasparov, but it showed that they all knew how to play chess. So, hopefully gave them some guidelines for the program. But here's the shocker: that the people who programmed AlphaGo, which is a complicated the game Go is more complicated than chess, and AlphaGo beat the world Go champion. And as I say, watch the movie. It's amazing, called AlphaGo. It's around 2014, 15, 16. It's still a fairly new thing. And the real shocker is that the programmers didn't understand how to play Go at all except for the rules. So they didn't know any Go strategies. They weren't Go players. They just knew the rules. And all they did, well, it's a big all, they only told AlphaGo what the rules were. And then they had some learning routines, very deep learning routines. So every time it played Go, it got better and better and better. But they themselves were not Go players. They just knew the rules of the game. So that's even more amazing, right? And more evidence to support the thesis that Lady Lovelace's objection doesn't hold water, because basically a machine can do more than we tell it to do if we make it a learning machine. Is that clear? That's a very important point. And this whole idea is anticipated by Turing. And he's the one, once again, who developed the idea and predicted that there would be learning machines. And that's what we're going to come to toward the end of this reading. We're going to come to the idea. He devotes a whole section to it, right? Learning machines. Well, there's one more objection here I want to cover with you, which would actually defeat him, okay? But we don't know how it works. It's called the argument from extrasensory perception. So do you guys know what ESP is? Have you heard about ESP? Just type it in for short. ESP, extrasensory perception. Some of you have heard of it and some of you not. Okay, it's a very strange term because, okay, I'll give a brief explanation. So I have two no's and a yes. Okay, at least some of you don't know. So you can Google it and you get a whole lot of information. You won't get a course on it in our psychology department. You might get a course on parapsychology, which I even doubt, but it's parapsychology. In other words, it's not a science. It's not something you can study. But there are people who appear to have extrasensory perception, or ESP. Now, it's a kind of contradiction in terms, because, I mean, if it's perceived, we know from Berkeley that you can only perceive with your senses. So if you're perceiving something, you can't be perceiving it outside your senses. Extrasensory means beyond the senses. So ESP is partly a contradiction in terms, because you're saying, oh yeah, this is extrasensory perception. In other words, I'm perceiving something which is beyond my senses. Well, that makes no sense, because we can only perceive with our senses. So it's a kind of a misnomer to say that there's extrasensory perception. But what we're describing is usually something, for example, called mind reading. Okay? So people who could, with uncanny ability, predict something with a greater than, what probability theory would tell us, a greater than probabilistic chance that they should be able to do it. So, for example, if you pick a card, if you look at a deck of cards and you pick a certain card out and only you know, somebody with ESP might be able to tell you whether that's a red or a black card, for example, with a greater than 50-50 probability. Or somebody might be able to tell you what suit it is, whether it's hearts, spades, clubs, or diamonds, with a greater than 25% probability. If somebody could tell you that with a greater than, statistical probability, then you'd have to give some explanation as to how they're able to do this. And they can do it with a card trick, but that doesn't count because there's always a trick to it, right? When you pick a card, put it back in the deck, and then the magician, so-called magician, tells you what card you picked. We know they don't have ESP. We know it was a card trick. We know there's some trick to it. And we can know, if we know the trick, we know how they did it. But genuine ESP would be like when you pick a card and they tell you which card it is, and it's not a card trick. Their ability is to read your mind or to perceive that card through some mechanism that most of us don't possess. That's called ESP. And there are a variety of ESP talents or gifts that some people are alleged to have. Now, what Turing is saying is, we'll go back to the reading, and it looks like I've lost the reading again, so let me reshare that with you. Turing is saying that if a person really did have ESP, then it would be very, very difficult for us to simulate that, since we don't even understand how it arises, right? Nobody can explain ESP at the moment. No one's able to explain it, whether it's really an existing phenomenon, and there are different manifestations of it. For example, telepathy, clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is seeing the future. Now, aren't there people who actually seem to be able to see the future? Are there, or are there not people who seem to be able to see the future? Right? Precognition, psychokinesis. You can look these things up. If you talk to psychics, I mean, they have a hotline, right? I think that they're all in California for some reason. But anyway, if you talk to psychics, right? You're gonna, some of them seemingly can tell you things about yourself, which you're gonna say, how do they possibly know that? Has any of you had the experience of talking to a psychic? Have any of you ever had the experience of being told something about yourself and you've really wondered? For $200. Well, okay, Erkin, yeah, they charge money, but my question is, money aside, I don't know what they charge. I don't spend money on them, but I'm just saying, yeah, it's vague. It's like the horoscope, right? Isn't it sometimes like reading a horoscope? Like it could mean anything, right? So it's not really specific. So it's not really a science, yes? It's like, a horoscope is very vague, but it could relate to anyone, true. But sometimes their archery is good, right? Sometimes they really, like they push a button. But I've had the experience of having my fortunes told at a county fair, or somebody reads your palm, or so, does that, or does tarot. And I have to confess that sometimes they've been very specific, or these people, I know they don't know me at all, but they've sometimes said things which I think they really could not have known, and they're not always vague. Sometimes they seem to know more than they could know. But in any case, the point is that if there are such abilities, then definitely then a machine would fail the imitation game, because if you are the interrogator and you're playing the imitation game, and there's somebody who's really telepathic, and on the one room, and a digital computer in the other chat room, and you're looking at, you pick a card out of the deck, and it's a red card, and you ask the question of both both of the witnesses. The telepathic person may know with a more than 50-50 chance whether you're holding a red card or black card. The computer would not know with more than a 50-50 chance, could not know with more than a 50-50 chance whether it's a red card or a black card. So if you played that game with someone who had ESP, then the computer would fail the imitation game, because you would know from the frequency of correct responses being more than 50-50 that, the one witness was a person with ESP. And you would know by the other frequency of correct responses being only 50-50 that the other witness was the computer. So Turing is conceding in that case, only in the case of ESP, that the computer would fail the Turing test, would fail the imitation game. But this all presupposes that ESP exists. And of course, we can't be sure of that. So that's a very hypothetical objection, may not be ever relevant. But the last point is really, really important. And this is what goes back to Lady Lovelace, who objected, recall, that machines can only do what we tell it to do. And he's now proposing, and this is before there were learning machines, okay? This is, again, I think, to give Turing some credit, that he's predicting in 1950 or 51 the existence of learning machines. And let's face it, self-driving cars, learning machines, right? So many things that we take for granted today are actually learning machines. Can I make a true confession to you guys? We're all talking to robots, yeah? We can't help it now, because our humans are getting replaced with bots. How many times have you phoned, like, let's say, for tech support for a product or a service, and you're always talking to a bot in the first place? It's harder and harder to get through to a person, correct? But these bots understand words, don't they? A lot of these bots, they say, tell me in a few words, right? They say, tell me in a few words what your problem is. You know this, right? And you say, oh, internet, you say phone, or you say, right? There's some words they understand. And they understand these words with different pronunciations. They understand these words. People are speaking English with a huge variety of different pronunciations and different accents, but these bots have enough artificial intelligence to process that sound bite, and a lot of the time, most of the time, they understand that word, and if they don't, they also know they don't, and they say to you, I'm sorry, could you repeat that, right? You know this. There are a whole bunch of bots out there that try and gate you to the proper help or to some other bot. But essentially, yeah, like Siri, yes, I mean, at a very low level, I'm not supposed to say her name because now all your Siri's going to wake up. Okay. But yeah, like Siri, right, like her. Okay. So basically, they understand words, and they also do a very good job of understanding basic pronunciations. Right. I have to confess to you, I'm partly responsible for this in a very minor way, but many, many years ago, more decades than I'm almost willing to confess, 1969, I had a summer job. I was still a student, and I had a summer job by stroke of luck. I got a summer job in a high-level think tank that was doing this work. This was declassified. I wasn't allowed to go to the class. It was like a spy movie. There were all these buzzers and lights and, different sections of the building which were classified. You needed certain clearance to get into those wings, and I was in just the low-level wing. But a buddy of mine and I were assigned to classify the errors. It was a digital voice recognition system, one of the first to be developed by Sylvania Labs. And our job was actually to mimic different accents or to get drunk. We actually went out for lunch and had a couple of beer, and then we came back, and they wanted our speech to be slurred. We were getting paid for this, so that our speech would be slurred, and so the robot had to figure out what we were saying, even if our speech was slurred, and so they wanted all these tests to be made so they could figure out how to eliminate the mistakes in voice recognition. So, I mean, in retrospect, I'm sorry I did that. I probably wouldn't do it again. I'd rather paint houses or do something that as a summer job that was, wasn't going to develop these bots, because I still prefer to talk to human beings. Okay, now I'm sorry I'm getting to talk to all these bots. They're doing such a job of understanding us that now they can replace us all with bots. Okay, but I'm sorry I played a small role in this. And so anytime you're inconvenienced by a bot, I guess you can partly blame me, only in a tiny, tiny, tiny way, okay? I just did it for a summer job, but please don't cancel me because of this, all right? I didn't intend for any any frustration to come out of it on the part of humans, but that's how it played out. So I think Turing is saying, yeah, machines can learn, and obviously they do, right? It's very clear. And this is the thing that made feedback to the Frankenstein syndrome again. If machines are learning, gee, what if machines learn how to run for office? What if machines learn how to play politics? Could machines eventually take over government? I mean, some of you may be worried about that. I wouldn't lose any sleep over it at the moment, but it's certainly, and here's Turing's sentiment to end the reading. He says, we may hope that machines will eventually compete with men in all purely intellectual fields, he says. Just intellectual fields, okay? Nothing, nothing social or political or personal yet. But what are the best ones to start with? He said, even this is a difficult decision. Many people think that a very abstract activity like playing chess would be best. He's saying this in 1951. It can also be maintained that it is best to provide the machine with the best sense organs that money can buy. In other words, for self-driving cars, right? We definitely provide them with all kinds of really good sense data. And that teach it to understand and speak English. Hello, here we go again, right? Or any other language, right? And now we have simultaneous translators. So we could speak English, and that would translate immediately into Mandarin or into any other language. You want to speak to somebody, you don't speak their language. We got these devices that do it for us now. And this process, he says, would follow the normal teaching of a child. So he's predicting that the learning machine would start in that way, bottom-up education. And things will be pointed out and named and so forth. And he says, interestingly enough, both approaches should be tried. Okay, so both computational approaches and also language-based approaches. And with that, eventually, perhaps emotion and other things that we thought were uniquely human, but which may end up being things that machines can simulate very well. So with that, I want to finish. That takes care of Turing, and I see it's been a very thought-provoking reading for us, certainly, taking all these questions about mind and brain and consciousness to a different level, right? So next week, just to wrap up, we're going to look at the next reading in your book, which is by John Searle. And John Searle has a very interesting, he's another contemporary philosopher from the West Coast. And John Searle has a really, really interesting, did this go to everybody? I just typed John Searle in. Yeah, okay, thank you. And that's the next reading. And he's going to have a very interesting argument to make against Turing. And he's going to bring back this notion that a simulation is not the same as a real thing, okay? And cannot be the same as a real thing. So just to be clear, and repeat what I said, I'm going to lecture on Monday, holiday or not, right? Holiday or not. I know that Monday's been moved to Tuesday next week, but your schedules have already been disrupted. Those of you who want to take the holiday, you're legally entitled to it. I have no problem with that. But I will be giving the lecture at 9:30 on Monday morning as usual, and I'll be uploading it as usual. So if you can't come on Monday, you can always watch it at your convenience. So next week is John Searle. That'll be Monday at 9:30 or asynchronously. And then we will wrap up John Searle on Thursday at this time, 11 to 12:15, okay? And I will post on Blackboard and email you all a reminder that your first essay on this first set of readings will be due on Monday, October 12th, which will give you lots of time, okay? Thank you all. Have a great weekend. Have a wonderful weekend. Everybody stay safe, stay well. I'll look forward to seeing you, some of you anyway, on Monday morning, and the rest of you asynchronously. Okay? Take care, everybody. You're welcome. Take care. Bye for now. Okay? So long.